and welcome to Man's Model Moments. Now I've been doing a lot of videos about paint this year, and most recently about mixing paint colours. Most comments on these videos have been very supportive, but a few have raised some questions about whether it's best to select a paint range and just modify those colours, or just pick a manufacturer and go with their suggestions. Now of course this is absolutely fine, but today I want to show you why I don't think that's necessarily a good idea. I want to demonstrate why by showing you some common standard colours, together with the closest matches for those standards, and show you why I personally prefer to go with what I feel looks best, rather than any colour that a manufacturer says is dark earth or RLM76, for example. Now I'm not going to be able to cover every single manufacturer's complete colour range, so it's entirely possible that some manufacturers have a closer match than I'm showing, but as you'll see, no one manufacturer gets everything right, which is part of the problem. Now, some I do have complete ranges for, Tamiya, Humbrol, ICM and Vallejo Model Air for example, and others I have the relevant specific paints relating to the subject, and as we'll see as well, sometimes a different paint in a range is closer to match a colour than the paint they actually recommend. In each example I'm going to use a hex grid, with the standard colour in the centre, and then I'll start at the top and work around clockwise with the closest CIE Lab DE matches. This doesn't tell the whole story, but it gives the best indication we have. I'm also limited by technology here, since I can only represent these on screen by RGB values, which are an approximation of appearance, and how it looks to you will also depend on your screen and other factors too. So with these caveats aside, let's start with RAF colours. We'll begin with topside colours since they're less controversial than sky for example. Here's dark earth. The mix I created is at the top here, and as you can see it's a good match, if a tiny bit too dark and rich compared to the standard. The Model Master shade is very good too, again being a shade darker but this time less saturated. Tamiya, Humbrol, ICM and Hataka's shades are all around the same value as the standard, but have much less red in them, leading to a more tan appearance. Even so, these are all within a DE of about 5, meaning they're not terrible matches overall, and next to an appropriate green you're unlikely to notice this too much. So let's have a look at that dark green then. As I mentioned in the mixing videos, this is a very dark and not very green colour, and our mix reflects this. Hataka, who has the worst of our close matches for dark earth, is in fact the closest here outside of our mix, with a very good DE of about 1.8. Kimera Colors is an interesting one here, since they produce single pigment artist's acrylics, and yet have a better colour match here than many dedicated model ranges, with a DE of just 2.27. The last two I've included here demonstrate that, as the MiG Ammo Atom IGN Nakajima Green is included as dark green in their late war RAF set, and yet has an awful DE of 17.66, whereas Humbrol's recommended 30 is absolutely nothing like dark green, with a DE of 36.27. Why Airfix recommend this colour is beyond me, when they actually have very good matches in the Humbrol range, the best of which is 253 Dunkelgrün, with a DE of just 1.42. In fact, Humbrol has at least a half dozen greens that are within a DE of 5 of the standard, making the 30 dark green choice very odd indeed. Maybe it's just a legacy thing. I mentioned later war colours there, so before turning to the subject of sky, let's deal with ocean grey, the other main upper surface colour used on RAF fighters. Here we have Humbrol having an excellent match with 27 sea grey. Hataka's ocean grey is a good match too, but the next two closest matches are generic colours from the Army Painter range and ICM, both of which are better matches than MiG's Atom Paint, which has a DE of over 8. Let's stay with the later war colours as we switch to the underside and take medium sea grey, which is a fairly neutral colour you might think may be an easy one to achieve consensus on. As you can see from this figure, nothing can be further from the truth. We have 6 different paints here and 6 different shades. So let's have a look at sky then. Unsurprisingly, there are again a range of shades here, with lighter, darker, more neutral, more green and more brown shades all represented. As a modeller, what exactly does this tell you? So maybe it's just RAF colours that are difficult, so let's have a look at the Luftwaffe instead. We'll start with RLM 70, 71 and 65, and then move to the 74, 75, 76 scheme of the later war as well. Now RLM 70 Schwarzgrün is a very dark green, so you might not expect too much variation here. But as you can see, once again, that's not the case. We have a range of lightness values, greens, and even blue. All of these colours are within 4.3D of the standard, but Vallejo, AK Interactive and Humbrol's named RLM 70s aren't even this close. RLM 71 Dunkelgrün is a bit better than RLM 70, with the worst match making it to the top 6 being Humbrol at a DE of 4.25, though you can see it is markedly too brown. AK does better here than with RLM 70, as the contrast between the two is just too small in their range, and they seem to almost be variants of RLM 71 rather than different colours. As a lighter colour, RLM 65 differences are no less noticeable, from the lighter, bluer shade of Kiproacryl to the less saturated shades of ICM and Vallejo, and the greener tones of AK and Humbrol. Bizarrely, however, looking at the later war RLM 76, these discrepancies tend to even out a bit, with RLM 76 shades being much closer together. Maybe because so much time has been devoted to this colour. Here you can see it's actually Vallejo that has the best match of any of the paints I have, better than the custom mix I made even. Humbrol actually has a better match than this, but it's labelled as RLM 78 Himmelblau. Its RLM 76 is once again over 10 DE remote from the standard. Going to the upper surface colours, again we're all over the place here. RLM 74 has lighter, darker and browner shades all represented, with gunze sangyos being the closest match. RLM 75 is even worse, with a whole plethora of scattered shades around the standard. So it's not that one nation has difficult colours, this is a more expansive issue. Now it really also doesn't matter what sort of colour we look at either. If we go to sand colours like middle stone, we see a range of shades here, which is also true of RLM 79, both the earlier, light version as shown here, or the more brownish later version which bears some resemblance to that RAF middle stone. In each case we have variations on a theme and the positions of the companies change. It's not like Vallejo, Tamiya or Humbrol are coming out in consistent positions, for example. Now I just want to take a moment to thank all of you who have supported me directly through YouTube memberships and Patreon. This really does keep the channel going, and without you it would be very difficult for me to be able to continue doing this. Now if you're only just seeing your name on here for the first time, it's because I update this monthly, and if I've prepared some videos ahead of time then there may still have the old list on, even if the list has been updated since then. Don't worry though, your name will get on the list and will continue to appear throughout your support. If you are considering supporting me, YouTube channel membership is by far the easiest way to do this, since Patreon is becoming a more challenging platform to engage with. Whichever you choose, however, I absolutely appreciate your contributions, and don't forget to come and check out the private members Discord, which you get access to at any level. Now I could go through and show you examples of this across various nations and periods, but let's cut that down a bit and look at a summary of average DE values from ranges matches. Either a specific named colour where available, or the closest shade if not. And where there isn't a non-named match, with a DE of 10 or so, I've omitted a result to make it fairer. Here are the results. We can see the homemade mixes come out at the top with a DE of just under 1.9, which is a pretty good match overall. A DE of 2 is typically what paint and fabric manufacturers use as their QC pass or fail threshold. Gunze Sangyo and Model Master are next, which have a limited number of paints in this test, but very good matches where they have them. Next are ICM, which is surprising given that they have a generic paint range with no specific named shades like RLM02 or RAF Sky. Revell is also close by, as is Tamiya. Vallejo stretch this a little more, which I was surprised at given the breadth of their range, and right there with them are Hataka. The next two results surprised me as well, as AK Interactive make a lot of dedicated shades, which are not particularly close matches with standards, achieving a marginally better result than the generic army painter sets, which are actually designed for wargamers. Humbrol don't perform well here at all, having some very poor choices which drag their average down a lot, but not as bad as the absolutely terrible matches that MiG Ammo have. Now admittedly, the number of paints in their test is small, but not smaller than the gun's sangyo paints, and a DE of over 10 is really extremely bad. I can demonstrate that fairly easily by showing the matches to BS283 Interior Grey-Green, together with the recommended Humbrol shade. It's just plain wrong. Compare that with their recommendation for RLMO2, however, where they're one of the best shade matches. There's just no consistency. So what on earth is going on here? How can a generic paint set have better colour matches than a paint specifically formulated to match a shade? Well, there are two main things at play here, I believe. The first, and I think most influential, is what standard the company used to mix to. If I take different reference values as my aim point, then I'm going to get different results as to how good a match is in each case. This brings me to the main point I want to convey in this video, and that is that the concept of what is correct is subjective. Now we can aim for accuracy, but what that looks like will be different for different people. There are endless debates in person and online about what colour such and such a paint was, or in colorization of black and white photos, weathering, scale effect, bleaching, oxidation, and so on. These arguments are cyclic and, I believe, ultimately pointless. They're unwinnable. You will never be able to prove a given shade unless you have that exact subject available and can measure it and the paint you are using with one another using the same device under the same conditions, and no one can do this, even with modern examples, so it's futile to get haughty and angry about any discussion about what is correct. If you do, you're immediately wrong and also look stupid to the rest of us. But Alex, I hear you cry, haven't you spent a lot of time talking about mixing paints for accuracy and doing research? Are you turning your back on all of this? Are you a hypocrite? Well, no, I'm not turning my back on all of this, and I'm certainly not a hypocrite. I firmly believe in doing research, and all of what I've shown you really underlines that to me. I have no idea what data AK or MiG or Vallejo are using to derive their colours from. They're effectively just saying, trust me bro. I think that blindly trusting in a company that says it has the answer in a specific bottle of paint that it has an intrinsic interest in selling is, well, a little naive. Airfix tells you to use Humbrol 30 dark green as an RAF camouflage colour when it isn't really anything like the BS standard. Why? Because it wants to sell you its paint. Now, leaving that point to percolate for a bit, the other part of this discrepancy I think is application and context. We've been talking about selecting the right colour for a particular paint applied as intended from the ministries concerned at the time, and with the best will in the world, especially during war, these were not always stringently followed. Pigments, especially historical ones, often fade or even react with sunlight and other pigments to create new perceived colours. Rain, oil, wind and dust abrades and changes them, and then we also have the much discussed topics of scale, enhanced contrast and mimetic effects. As an aside, a mimetic effect is where a colour looks different or changes shade in different lighting conditions. Some people will tell you that these don't exist, others that one or more of them is dominant, but the fact is that however you explain it, colours look different on a scale model than on a full-size subject. I happen to know a very diligent modeller who went to extreme lengths to find accurate German armour paint colours who doesn't believe in mimetic paint, saying that the effect is all in our brain's perception. He's 100% wrong in this regard, as some paint absolutely has different wavelength absorption characteristics and so absorbs light differently depending on the time of day, so it's absolutely a real-world physics effect, not a biological interpretive one. As I've discussed before, there is also a biological interpretive effect too, further complicating this whole can of worms. The result of all of this second part is that if I show you a bunch of these hex patterns for closest paint matches, different people will give different answers on which is the best match regardless of the DE value. This is only a measure of the colour distance based on an average human viewer after all, not a definitive absolute. It's the best guide we currently have, but it's still not the absolute end all of everything. So whilst I will strive for colours that are as close to what my understanding of those used on actual subjects were, that is the starting point for the painting of any model. If I pre-shade and weather a model, the surface isn't any longer a single shade. It's a tapestry of different hues that come together to create the illusion of realism in a small reproduction of actuality. We shouldn't forget that our hobby is a creative one, and artistry plays a large role in all of this. I can guarantee anyone that wins a model competition isn't just choosing a range of manufacturers' paints and applying them as the finished deal. So getting so hung up on which manufacturer has the most accurate elfenbein shade is as pointless a discussion as trying to say who the best artist of all time is. There will be some consensus around a top 10 maybe, but you're never going to have one single winner. I hope that encourages you to trust yourself a little bit more and use whatever paints you feel are best for your project. I think other qualities of a paint are much more important than its exact shade, since the colour is the one thing we are very easily able to adjust, whereas the grind size or pigment density is a bit beyond most people's capabilities or desires. With that, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and I look forward to seeing you on my next video covering the broad subject of modelling paints. That's all for this instalment of Man's Model Moments. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel for more like it, and share this video with others you think would also enjoy it. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and if you're feeling generous then I also have a Patreon, which is absolutely the best way of helping me to grow the channel and produce more content like this. With that, I hope you have plenty of modelling moments of your own, and I look forward to welcoming you on the next video.